Hey everyone, I'm Rachel. In today's tutorial, I want to show you how to create melting clocks using the Color Therapy app. This idea is based on the painting of melting clocks called The Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali. It's a surrealist painting and a unique way to alter your images in the app. If you want to follow along, search for this image under clocks. So the first thing to do is tap to fill in the whole image. I'm going to use colors from the classic palette, the brown palette, and the gold palette. So I finished tapping in the colors. As you can see, I use the gold palette set to gradient for a lot of the clocks. And let's go ahead and zoom in here on this clock and focus on this one right now. If you want to know what colors I'm using specifically, I'm using the gold palette third color from the right on the top row, gradient for the outer edges of the clock. And then from the metal palette, I'm using the brown on the top row for the inside part. And then I'm just using a basic beige from the beige palette for the middle part. Now, it's really easy, so let's just use the smear tool. Oh yeah, and don't forget to fill in the numbers on the clocks too. I'm using the darkest color from the metal palette for that. Now what we're gonna do is just use the smear tool. It's really that easy. So go to the smear tool, size 1, opacity 100, and make sure coloring inside the lines mode is set to off, and you're just gonna start to melt the clock. You can melt it however you want. Kind of just bring it down. Kind of imagine how it would look if it was melting onto the floor. So it's gonna kind of come out to the side a little bit. You might have a couple drips coming down. And the fun part is you can decide how much you want to melt it, maybe a little bit, maybe a lot. I also like to make the edges a little bit wobbly. So, I'm going to turn the stroke opacity down a little bit so you can kind of see how it's looking, and making those edges kind of come in and making them look a little bit wobbly, like they're just starting to get really hot and melting. Just a little bit. Before you go too far, let's use that dark color from the metal palette and use the airbrush tool, size 25 and opacity 45. And with coloring inside the lines mode on, just shade the inside of the clock. I'm kind of just going around in a circle and make sure those edges are nice and dark. It looks more realistic that way. And then let's also shade behind the clocks using the brown palette. And I'm just using that first color in the brown palette. I'm doing size 25 and opacity at 80. I'm gonna shade behind the clock a bit. So I'm using coloring inside the lines mode on right now, just to give a little bit of a shadow. Shadows are really helpful to make it look more realistic, and with surrealism, you want it to be as realistic as possible, but with a twist. Now we want to shade underneath the melted parts. Let's start with opacity at 35 and then size at 1. I'm going to shade underneath those melted parts. Then you raise the opacity to 70, and then use the fourth color on the top row of the brown 2 palette for a darker shadow. And just add it in here and there. Make it nice and dark. Let's further the details with the pen tool now. Size 1 and opacity at 70. And then let's make those melted parts a little bit more precise. So just kind of tracing some areas. You don't have to do all of them. Just here and there, just to make it look more realistic. And you can lower your stroke opacity to see what's going on. Probably check in the app in the effects page to see how it looks. Now it's essentially that easy. So what you want to do is now apply it to the other clocks in the same way. And for the smear tool, you might want to raise it just a little bit for the bigger clocks. But yeah, you just have at it and just start smearing and blending downward. Don't forget to add those shadows inside the clock and behind it. And just kind of have fun with it. For this one, what I would do is sample the color that you're blending and then raise your pen tool size to 15 and opacity 100. If you want it to be dripping on the couch, then you just draw it kind of on the couch like that. So you can extend the drips as needed. And then you can use the smear tool even within the clocks to help blend it as well. Now, the key to surrealism is making sure everything looks as realistic as possible. So make sure to add a lot of details to the rest of the coloring to make it really look unique and interesting. If you'd like to see more tutorials like this, don't forget to subscribe to the Color Therapy YouTube channel so you don't miss any new tutorial videos. Thanks for watching our tutorial. You can get the Color Therapy app for free on the App Store.